we're continuing our conversation. You've been with us for the past few weeks. We're continuing our conversation. We're calling It Happens. And we're just saying simply this. Life happens. Life happens. Sometimes life just happens, right? Accidents happen. Sickness happens. Cancer happens. Life happens. It just, out of nowhere, it happens. Sometimes life happens because you make a choice or you make a decision. And because you make a certain choice and you make a certain decision, then life happens because there's a consequence or there's a result of your decision. And what we've been saying here these past few weeks is that we all have dreams, right? We all have these desires for our life. This is the life that I want, right? This is what I dream my life will be. This is the kind of marriage that I want. This is how I want my kids to be. And these are the kind of relationships I want. This is the kind of financial security that I want. These are the success that I want, right? We all have these dreams and desires for our lives, but there's this reality, right? If we're honest, there's this gap between what I want, right, what I dream about, and where I am, and there's this gap. And so what happens? Life happens, and it hinders us. We've also talked about the idea that I believe that you were created on purpose, with a purpose, for a purpose. See, there's deeper stakes. You may not be there with me on this, but that's okay. There are deeper stakes because you have one life. You have a one and only life, and I believe there's no accidents in this room. Regardless of how you were conceived or whatever that story looks like, you are not an accident, and you were formed and shaped in your mother's womb, and you are here at this time, at this place, for a reason, and there's a purpose, and there's deep meaning to it. There's significance to it, and you have a purpose, and it's bigger than just you. It's not just about you or how much money. It's deeper, and it matters. It matters so much. And so what we're trying to do in this conversation is just kind of take an honest look at this and go, hey, listen, there are things that are threats and core issues that keep us from living the life we want to live, but also from living the life we were called to live. And so our goal here, we've been saying this, is to shine a light on the biggest threats, the biggest issues, right, to the life you really want to live. These threats, these issues hinder you and keep you from living the life that you really want to live, right? And so then we're trying to talk about, well, what are some keys? What are some solutions to overcoming them, right? These are things that we all face. Every single one of us, we face these, and most of the time, we don't see them coming, right? They kind of come up out of nowhere like, whoa, how did that get in my life? And they surprise us, they catch us off guard, and what they do is they derail us, or they hinder us, or they stop us from living the life that we dream of living, and the life that I believe you have been called to live. Now, real quickly, if you have been with us kind of along, we started week 1 a few weeks ago. We talked about the idea of cynicism, not a word you hear very often, but how easy it is, especially in Miami, to become jaded and cynical, right? And we talked about that the antidote, right, for that is hope and curiosity. And then in week 2, we talked about this idea that all of us feel about the idea of disconnection. And we said that statistically that there is a loneliness epidemic in our city. Even though we're surrounded right outside these walls by millions of people, right? There's traffic right now. There's a train going by. There's millions of people around us, but yet in the midst of that, we feel lonely. It's called crowded loneliness, right? And we said that only 18% of people say that they have someone they can talk to. Not just like, hey, how's the weather, or do you see the game, but like someone you can share your heart with. Only 18% of people say they have someone that they can talk to. Week 3, we talked about the idea of influence. And we talked about this idea that we want to make a difference, we want to help, we want to help people get better, we want the world to be better, but the hardest person to lead is the person that you see every single morning when you look in the mirror. And that's the hardest thing. We talked about the stake in the ground, like making a resolve, making some decisions that we will lead ourselves well so that we can be who God created us to be. And then last week, if you weren't here, it was fun. We talked about pain and suffering. It was fantastic. Everybody was clapping. It was okay, yeah, you guys weren't here, but it was just awesome. But the reality is that the idea of pain and suffering is the number one reason that people walk away from faith. It's the people leave like, I'm out on God, I'm out on church, I'm out. Because why do bad things happen to good people? And even worse than that, why do good things or seemingly the easy way for people who aren't so good? Like that person they're not good. All they care about is themselves and they get it easy. And here are these people that really care. They care about other people and are trying to do something and their life is hard. And if there's really this loving and good God that we're singing about, then why is there just so much grief and despair and pain? And if you missed any of these conversations, you can check them out on our YouTube channel there under Miami Church. Now, I've been having so many conversations these past few weeks in my neighborhood team. I've been having individual conversations, and even what I am experiencing personally, that I am convinced more than ever that what we're talking about here in this It Happens is so relevant and it's so important, right? And we started this church just a couple of years ago with this idea that we're going to try to just take these kind of issues head on. We're just going to try to address them. And so what we're talking about, what we've been talking about, it matters. It's important, and your life matters. Your one and only life matters. And so this is so important because life is happening, right? Life is happening to you. Life is happening to me. And we got to be ready. Because in my heart, I really want to see you live the life that you want to live. But I really want to see you live the life that you were called to live. I really want to see you fulfill your life purposes. And here's where I want to go today. It's one of the things I find in my own life. I find this in my own life. I find this in the lives of those right around me. Is it just becomes sometimes easier just to kind of settle. Like just, it's okay. It's okay. Status quo, right? It's not great. It's not bad. Just okay. I mean, how's your marriage? It's good. It's okay. It's okay. How are the kids? Good. Nobody's in jail. It's good. They're okay. Everything's okay. How's your job? That's good. Like a little more money here, but it's okay. It's okay. How's your health? I'm all right. It's good. It's okay. How are your friendships? How's your work? How's school? It's just okay. And what I want to do is I want to ask a series of questions, and it's really the same question, but I want to frame it some different ways. And I just want to ask this to kind of provoke this conversation along. And so you'll see them on the screen. Here's the first question. What are you holding on to that's holding you back, right? And you see this little thing. What are you holding on to, right? What are you holding on to that's holding you back? What are you holding on to that the people around you wish that you would let go of? Here's another way to say it. What is weighing you down because you refuse to let it go? Like you won't let it go, and so you're just kind of dragging it around with you. And you thought it would make your life better, but it's actually making your life more complicated. Here's another way to say it. What is slowing you down because you won't put it down? What is slowing you down because you won't put it down? You're the idea of dragging, right? You're tied. It's like a Velcro. What is dragging you down? It's slowing you down because you won't let it go. Here's another way to say it. What are you holding on to that you feel compelled to keep hidden? What are you holding on to that you feel compelled to keep? I mean, if she found out, or if he found out, or if they found out, if your kids knew, you'd be so embarrassed. If your coworkers knew, you'd be embarrassed. What have you been hiding that causes you to compensate for what you should just simply let go? Here's maybe another one. Have you read this? I've been studying this the last few weeks. This is fascinating. Do you know how to catch a monkey? You should, right? I mean, we're living in Miami, right? I'm just kidding. You know how to catch a monkey? This is fascinating. This has been going on for centuries. I didn't know this, right? I mean, I'm a city guy, right? Monkey jungle down south in Kendall or whatever. But here's how you catch a monkey. I didn't know this. Is you take a coconut, a large coconut. Okay, this is real. You can look this up later. Don't look it up now. Get off your phone, Mike. You can. I'm just kidding. You take a large coconut, right? And you tie a rope to it. Okay, you hollow out the coconut. Okay, you make it empty on the side, and then you make a hole, right? And you make the hole a specific size. So you make the hole. It's like this is my coconut. That's all I got. Okay, you make a hole, and the hole is big enough where an open hand can go in, but that a closed fist cannot. Right? You heard this? You put inside the coconut some bananas and some fruit. And said monkey comes along, and he or she reaches into the coconut, grabs the fruit, and then is tied to the tree or whatever's holding them down. And the monkey refuses to let go. right? The monkey will not let go, and so the monkey becomes very easy to capture because the monkey is tied to the tree. So here's maybe the way I could ask this question. What are you holding on to that's making a monkey out of you? Is it a grudge? Somebody did something to you, and you're going, I'm going to show them. I'll be stronger than I'll hold out, right? I'll hold out. Is it pride? Some kind of insecurity? Bitterness? Like, I'm not. They wronged me. They got to get. They better ask me for forgiveness first. I'm not. No, I'm gonna hold on. Some kind of secret. Some kind of addiction. It started out just as something fun, a hobby, a pastime, but it turned into a pathway. Anger, the habits, some kind of former relationship that you just won't let go of. What is it that you're holding on to that's making a monkey out of you? And you just refuse, no matter what, you refuse to let go. See, there's the simple principle here, right? I mean, we could just kind of stop here. Here's the simple idea. Identify what it is that you're holding on to. What is it? And realize it's hurting you. It's hurting you at home. It's hurting you financially. It's hurting you relationally. It's hurting your body. It's costing you your dreams. It's impacting your influence. Just learn what it is. Like, what is it? Identify it. And just simply let go. Just let it go. Walk away. Because you're not only hurting yourself, but by holding on, you're putting off the people that you love the most or the people who love you the most. Now, right here, I want to take just kind of an interesting turn in the conversation for just a couple more minutes. I want to take an interesting turn, and I want to talk specifically to those of us in the room who are followers of Jesus, okay? Now, I realize in this room that not all of us are there. We're not all like, oh, yeah, I want to follow Jesus. I'll give him my life. I want to serve. I get that. We're not all there, and that's great, right? We started our church to be a church for people who don't always say yes or believe, and so that's where we are. But I want to talk specifically to those of us who have come to a place where Jesus says, follow me, and you say, okay, yes, I'm going to give you my life, Jesus, and to the best of my ability, I'm going to follow you. So let me talk to those of you for just a second, because there is more. It's even more. It's even deeper. It's even deeper than just, hey, just let go. Just let go, okay? It's even deeper than that, because the problem with holding on is that you become enslaved, right? You become mastered. And the problem with being enslaved or becoming mastered is that you already have a master. Okay, now this is weird language. We don't use this kind of master-slave language, right? It brings up dark periods in our history. It brings up terrible things. But what else do you call this, right? What else do you call this if you're walking around life and you refuse to let go? You are enslaved. You are captured. You are captivated, right? What do you call that? And so in the first century, there was a guy named Paul, and he wrote a letter to the people in Rome. And there was this booming, in the first century, there was this booming growth of believers, of followers of Jesus in Rome. In fact, if you know anything about history, you know there were so many Christians in Rome in the first century that Nero, the Roman emperor, when there was a big fire in the city of Rome, he blamed it on the Christians, right? Because there were just so many of them, the Christians did it, right? He blamed it on. And so Paul wrote this letter to the Christians, to the followers of Jesus in Rome, and he talks about this very issue. And so I want to look at it real quick. And here's what he says, right? And look at the language. Right here, Romans 6:16. He says, he's talking to the followers of Jesus. He says, don't you realize, hey, don't you realize that you become the slave to whatever it is you choose to obey? Okay, he says, whenever you stick your hand in, right, the coconut, and you refuse to let go, you are obeying that thing, whatever it is you won't let go of. Your habit, your addiction, your anger, your lack of forgiveness, whatever it is you're holding on to, when you obey it, you make yourself a slave to it, right? Whatever you say yes to, or whoever you say yes to that is controlling you, that person or that thing becomes your master. And then he continues. Look at this. This is awesome language. Next verse, end of 16. You can be a slave to sin, which leads to death, or you can choose to obey God, which leads to righteous living. Okay, now we got some Bible language going on here, okay? So let me just try to unpack this a little bit, okay? This word sin, anytime we throw this word out, it's a loaded word, because instantly, whatever your experience in church or whatever, you've got some picture of this idea of sin. But here's what he's saying, because in the New Testament, sin is real simple. It's a simple idea. Sin is simply anything that hurts you. Sin is simply anything that hurts you or anything that hurts the people around you. So anything that hurts your wife or your husband or your kids or your coworkers or your neighbors. Because what sin does is it breaks relationships. It breaks relationships. Maybe an easy way to talk about it is this. If it's not good for you, if it's not good for your spouse, if it's not good for your kids, if it's not good for your coworkers, if it's not good for your neighbors, then that would fall under the category that Paul calls sin. And he says that sin always leads to death. Sin destroys, sin breaks, sin kills. And sin kills things. Now, you know this. You wouldn't probably frame it like that. You wouldn't be like, oh, Greg, sin kills. Like, no, if you said that to me, I'd think you were weird. But we know this, right? Because somebody did something to you, right? Or you did something to someone. Or you had a secret, or you were unfaithful, or you broke a marriage vow. You lied, or you bended the truth. And what happens, right? What happens? It's not good for you. It's not good for somebody else. And it destroys, it breaks, it kills. And sin kills relationships. Sin kills careers. Sin destroys what and who you are when you look in the mirror. Sin can kill your health. It can kill your financial security. I mean, if you have a bad habit, if you're irresponsible, if you refuse to listen to her or you refuse to listen to him, if you just do what you're going to do regardless of what somebody says, what happens? Sin kills. And this is what he's saying. He says, sin leads to death. It kills, and it kills hope. And the worst part of it is sin just kills peace. It destroys, and it breaks. And many of us in this room, right, you know this, right? We've experienced this, right? You have a broken relationship with someone, with a loved one, with a parent, with a kid, or with a coworker or a former boss, right? And there's this tension and there's this broken relationship. And what happened, right? There was sin. It was the root cause. And friends, our God, this God that we sing about, this God that I know, the real God, the one and only true God, who has invited you and invited me to call him Heavenly Father, this one and only true God who gave his life for you, who lived for you, this God who loves you so much, of course God is against sin. And God's not against sin because he's against you. Actually, God is against sin because he's for you. Because sin breaks. And it breaks God's heart. It breaks God's heart when you or when people around you are hurt or broken or enslaved. And so what Paul is saying here in Romans, as he's writing this letter, what he's saying here is, it's killing you. It's killing you. This is not what God had designed for you. This is not how you created. Don't settle. It's not okay. Don't just be okay with that. This is keeping you. It's hindering you. It's keeping you from living the life you are meant to live. It's destroying. He says, this is not okay. Paul is trying to say, you are a slave to this. Let it go. It is not okay. Quit being a monkey. So you can be a slave to sin, which leads to death, or, here's his counterpoint, or you can choose to obey God, which leads to righteous living. Now, again, that's some crazy language, but here's basically what he's saying. He's saying that obedience to God makes things right. Doing what's hard, let me rephrase that. Doing what's right when it's hard makes things and keeps things right between you and God, you and others, and you and you. And we said something similar to this a few weeks ago, and I just keep coming back to it because it's so right. And it's so true, and it will save my time from having to come and try to pull you out of the ditch later on, right? This is so right and so true, and if we would just live by this one simple principle, it would radically alter the way that you do life. If you just live this principle that we talked about a couple weeks ago, every single day, it would just radically alter the way of your life. And here's what we said a couple weeks ago. This is one of those decisions. He says, I will prioritize what I value most over what I want now. I'm going to make decisions every day about what I value most over what I want now. And we said a couple weeks ago, this is just wisdom, right? This is what great spouses do. This is what great parents do. This is what great bosses do. This is what great employees do. This is what great friends do. This is what great leaders do, right? But the challenge to this, if we're just keeping it real, is that all of us in this room right now, we want something now that is not best for us. We want some kind of food or dessert, or we want to have sex with someone, or we want to buy this car, or we want to go spend this money. We want to look at something, or we want to say something. Have you ever heard this? I know I'm going to regret what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. And what it's doing, and what Paul is trying to say is, it's killing you, and it's hindering you, and it's crushing your dreams. It's keeping you from the life that you want to live, and most of all, it's crushing and hindering you from living the purpose that you were called to live. He says, hey, make decisions on what you value most. What do you really value? What do you really value 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years? Make decisions today in regards to those values instead of what you want or what you feel right now in the moment. Here's the way I said it earlier. Doing what's right when it's hard makes things and keeps things right between you and God, you and others, and maybe most important, you and you. I don't know about you, but there's nothing better than to lay your head on the pillow at night, right? When it's all quiet, and everything's kind of at peace. And you lay your head on the pillow at night, and you're like, well, I don't know how that's going to work out. I don't know exactly how it's going. But I did the right thing. I did the right thing. I made the right choice. I walked away. I stood my ground. And on the contrary, there are few things. There are few things in life that tear at your soul more than facing yourself in the mirror and knowing I was a coward, or I lied, I bended the truth, I deceived, or I compromised. See, because what Paul is saying is that sin kills, and it takes a toll. It takes a toll on your soul, like to the core of you, but obedience makes it right. Next verse, 17, real quick. Thank God, he keeps writing, to the church at Rome, to these believers at Rome. Thank God, once you were slaves to sin, but here's the key words, but now, again, he's talking to followers of Jesus, but now you wholeheartedly obey this teaching we have given you. Look at this. He says, you wholeheartedly obey, right? He's not saying you just believe. He says, no, you obey. You wholeheartedly obey this teaching. And this teaching is a new way of thinking. This teaching is a new pattern for living. It's a new way of seeing the world. It's a new way of seeing yourself. It's a new way of seeing your family. It's a new way of living. It's a new way of serving God. He says, there's a new way, guys, a new way of understanding forgiveness, a new way of viewing your stuff, a new way of viewing your money and your time and your future and your career. And it centers around this very simple idea that Paul had been teaching. It's very simple, it's very compelling, and it's also terrifying all at the same point. And he says this, Paul says, hey, you know what this idea is, this teaching that we've given you is this. We are to live in a way, we are to treat others in a way that's in accordance with the way that God, through Jesus, has treated us. Now, we talk about this all the time, right? What's the golden rule? Do unto others, you have them do unto you, okay? That's a terrible rule. Here's what Jesus says. Here's a better rule, the platinum rule, right? Or the titanium rule. I have a status, titanium. I don't even know what that means. But the titanium rule is this, right? Do unto others as God, through Jesus, has done to you. And if we embrace this, like if we really get this, if it becomes our heartbeat, if it moves from our head to our heart, it changes everything. Because what it will ultimately do is it will compel you to let go of whatever it is that you're holding on to. whatever it is that is weighing you down, because the overarching command comes from this place of extraordinary love. We are to love because we have been loved. And when this becomes the driving force of your life, when this becomes the driving force of when we really get this, right? It's easy to say this, it's cute in church, Greg, that's awesome. But we really get this, then anything that's not good for you, or anything that's not good for him, or anything that's not good for her, it just becomes off limits. It becomes off limits because Paul is saying obedience. Obedience frees. Sin kills. Obedience frees. And what God wants for you, what God longs for you, is to have freedom. Not to be enslaved, right? Not to be dragging something around, something weighing you down that's hindering and keeping you from living the life that you want to live. Now look at this. One more thing real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. Paul unpacks this a little further. Look what he says. This is in 1 Corinthians. Again, another letter to a church, to believers in the city of Corinth. He says, do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you received from God? Now again, he's writing this to a first century audience. And in the first century, people are saying, absolutely not, Paul, I am not a temple. Because in the first century, everybody went to the temple. There were pagan temples, right? So there were pagans. If you were a pagan, you went to a temple. If you were Jewish, you went to a temple, and you'd make a journey a couple times a year all the way to Jerusalem, and there was this big temple up on the hill. And this temple, whether you were pagan or whether you were Jewish, this temple in the first century was this holy, sacred place. And this temple, right, was this very sacred site. And what Paul is doing here, and again in our 2019 perspective, we don't fully get this, right? What he was doing here was radical, because what he was doing, he's saying, hey, the first century person, whether they're pagan or Jewish, they believe, right, that the temple is a sacred site, and a temple is where heaven meets earth. It's the sacred site where heaven meets earth. And Paul goes, exactly. Because God's done something radically new. And through his son Jesus, from now on, God lives in you. And if you're a follower of Jesus, where does heaven meet earth? In you. And the person to your left or to your right or the person behind you. He says, you are sacred because of who lives in you. And he says, don't you know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, that God resides in you, whom you receive from God? And he says this, you are not your own, you were bought with a price, therefore honor God with your bodies. Now again, first century, he's writing this to a Roman culture, and this is really offensive. Okay, this language, the way that he's writing it, this is actually an offensive, radical language. Because in that culture, it was a slave-driven culture. They had slave markets. There were hundreds of slaves being brought in every day. And so to the audience that he was writing to, they were probably either former slaves or slave owners. And so this language, this bought at a price, this kind of language, this was offensive language. Because Paul is trying to make a huge point here. And Paul is saying, hey, you got to get this. Okay? If you're a follower of Jesus, okay, I get what's going on in culture, I get all that, but you got to understand this, because this is huge. He says your value, the value of a life, the value of every single person you've ever seen, every person you've ever come eyeball to eyeball about, the value is based on this idea of being purchased by the blood of Jesus. Being purchased by the blood of, your value comes because you were created by God, and God says that you were created in his image, and you have value. Several years ago, when I was in my 20s, I was living in Chicago, and one of my mentors at that time, very, very influential in my life and in my leadership at that time, he would tell this story, and I just love this story. He says that one time, I was down in Central America, and he was just down there training pastors in Central America. And he ended up having dinner with kind of a big shot CEO type, right? One of these Forbes 500 guys that was in town on business, and they kind of had a mutual acquaintance, and so they ended up having dinner. And so they're just having dinner, and this guy, again, he's super sharp, and they're having dinner, and this CEO he was having dinner with, by his own admission, was like, oh man, I'm not interested in the God stuff. I'm far from God. I'm not really interested in that. And so what's funny is they're having dinner, and about halfway through the dinner, this CEO looks at this pastor, this former mentor of mine. He looks at him, he says, you seem pretty normal. I mean, you seem like a pretty normal functioning. You're actually pretty smart. He's like, what's with the God stuff? Like, how do you, like, what's wrong with you? Basically, is what he was saying in a nicer way. Like, what's wrong with you? And I love the response. And he used language, kind of king tone of language, which is a little, throws us off a little bit. He goes, but he says, you know what? He asks the CEO back. He says, you know what leaders and kings do? You know what they do? He says they send their subjects, right? They send their subjects as soldiers into battle to die for them, right? That's what they do. They're in charge. They're the leader. They're the king. They send their soldiers into battle to die for them. He goes, you know what my leader and my king, Jesus, does? He sees the needs of his subjects and soldiers, and then he volunteers to go die for them. And then instead of calling them subjects and soldiers, he calls them sons and daughters. And this is the heart and the message of Jesus. See, the heart of the message of Jesus is to be in a real and authentic, life-giving, hope-filled relationship with you and with me. And he says, hey, what is it that's holding you back? What is it that's holding you back? Because this is not what I called you to. This is not what I want. It's keeping you. It's hindering you. It's destroying you. It's keeping you from the life that I want to give you, from freedom, from hope, from peace. Like, what is it? What is this thing that you refuse to let go? Is it anger? Is it a habit? Is it a friend? Is it a group of friends? Is it money? Is it alcohol? Is it ignoring your health? Is it spending too much time thinking about your health? Is it competing with your family? Is it some kind of obsession? He says, my heart, my passion, my desire, my plan is for you to have freedom and not to be enslaved, not to be captured by something, because I want you to live the life that I called you to live. And Paul is trying to say, hey guys, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. Is this worth it? This is not worth it. Don't be mastered by anything or anyone. Don't be enslaved. Don't settle. Okay, it's just not okay. It's time to change. It's time to break out of our comfort zones, because God has so much more for you. Whatever your dreams are for your life, whatever you want to see your marriage or your kids or your job or your success, whatever your financial goals are, whatever those are great. But God has even more for you. He has a bigger plan for you, a God-given purpose for your life. And he says, hey, it's time to let go. Can I share one quick thing and then, I'm over, right? Yeah, baby. Let me share one. I got to share this. That's all right. I'm the boss. They can't fire me. I do have some bosses, but thanks, John. Can I share this one quick thing? Thanks for hanging in with me. When I in 2008, my wife and I, we didn't have any kids, did we? No kids. We moved from Chicago. We were in Chicago, and there's too much snow. And we moved to San Antonio, Texas. And we went to be part of this. It was a big church, right? Big, huge church there. And the pastor, he's a well-known guy. If I said his name, you would know who he is. He's all over Walmart and airports or whatever. Where's the Walmart? I don't know where Walmart is. And so we moved there because he's a great dude. And he had this heart. He had this really big heart. He had a heart for the city. And he said, you know what? I want to see us, the church, I want to see our church reach 10% of San Antonio. Now, at the time, San Antonio was 2.1 million. I have no idea what it is now. So if you do the math there, that's a lot of people. And so he said, my heart is to reach this city 210,000 people. And so he brought me and some people in, right? He brought me and some people, and the idea was to take the church out of the walls, right? Like we're in the church is not just church's people. I hope you know this. Church is people, not the building. But it was a very building-centric kind of church, and like we want to go out into the neighborhoods of the city and just try to take the good news and help people, help the poor, help the underserved, and just help people. And that's what we're doing. So he brought me in from Chicago to help kind of lead this charge. And I was young and fired up, and get out of my way, I'll run over you kind of thing going on. And I'll never forget, early on, we hadn't been there very long, I get called into this office of one of these elder types. It's this lady, she'd been there forever, and sweet lady, and she calls me in, and she sits me down, kind of one of those, hey, sit down, young man. And she looks at me, and she says, hey, Greg, we're good. We're good. We're already the largest church in our particular denomination, which they were. We're the largest church in the United States of America in our denomination. We're good. And that conversation right there drives even what we do here at Miami Church, right? Because we are determined, our heart, our mission, our passion, our resolve, our drive is that we're not good until every single man, woman, and child in the great city of Miami has a chance to respond to the love of Jesus. We're not going to stop. We're going to keep serving. We're going to keep giving. We're going to keep going, right? It's what drives us every single day and every single week. It's why we gather. It's why we go. It's why we try to serve, right? We're not good. It's not okay. We're not settling, right? We love each other. We love what God's doing. This is awesome. This is great. We want to celebrate that, but we're not good until every single person, every single man, every single woman has a chance to respond to this life-giving hope that I believe Jesus wants to go. So let go. It's holding you back. It's holding us back. Let's let go and let's go. Let's go and be who God called us to be. Will you pray with me? God, I thank you for these men and women who are in this room. Thank you for the men and women who are serving our kids right behind those walls. God, there are some amazing people. There are amazing men and women. There's so much talent in this place. God, I'm blown away that these people would be part of what we're doing here, God. But I believe you called us, God. I look around here and I go, you've got your hand, you're moving. You've got your hand on some of these men and women in this place, and you want to do amazing things in and through them. God, the sky's really the limit. The only people holding us back is us. I also look at us collectively, God, what you're doing in this church and how we're growing and reaching more people and gaining more influence in the city for you. And God, I pray unashamedly that your favor and your blessing would continue to fall on us, God, and that we could continue to see hundreds and thousands of people come to know what it means to be in this life-giving, real, authentic relationship with you, God. And you don't want us to be enslaved to anything, God. You don't want us to be enslaved. You want us to live. You're calling us to live this life, this grander purpose that's about so much bigger than us, God. It's far beyond what we could even probably think or imagine or dream it right now. But you have so much for us, God. And I pray that individually and collectively as your community, as your church, will go and reach that, God, and believe, God. Thank you so much for your grace and your love and that you called us and given us opportunity to serve you. And so, God, we love you now, and we pray this in the name of Jesus.